Good morning. I would request Rohit Jwerajani to introduce our guest speaker of the day.
Thank you, Umesh. Morning to all of you. R Gopalakrishnan. He has played every type of board role: the CEO, the executive director, the non-executive director, and the board chairman. He has been an independent director of more than 25 company boards for over 35 years in India and abroad. His board experience is rich and has provided him a ringside view of corporate governance as it has evolved since its nation stirring in 1990 to its most exhaustive avatar now. Governance tends to be obsessed with the technicians and rule. Gopal believes governance, corporate or public, as much has to do with human behavior as it has to do with the rules and procedures. It is about niti, conduct, and niyat, intent, as much as about niyam. Inside the boardroom is Gopal's 18th book. Friends, I present R Gopalakrishnan.
Thank you, Rohit. The floor is there for Gopal, and we would be listening to him say around 30 minutes. And then after that, there will be a brief session for question and answers based on the time allotted. And after that, the vote of thanks, and we'll conclude this meeting by 9:30. So, floor is yours, Gopal.
Umesh, thank you, and Rohit, thank you, and good morning to members of the Rotary. Hello? Yeah. So, I want to use this very precious time, half an hour, to just give you a jhalak, the highlights of what's been going on in my mind. First of all, because of my background, I went in my first avatar as Hindustan Lever, and I retired there as a vice chairman. Then I went to Tata Sons. I spent 18 years there, and I retired as a director of Tata Sons. People assume that my books are all management books. They are right, but they're also wrong. And I want to focus on the wrong part of it. Because in my third avatar, which is my current avatar, which has been going on for about 8 years since I retired from Tata Sons, and I'm unemployable anymore, I have decided to judiciously handle the two pieces of wealth that I have acquired during my 55-year-old career. The first is the wealth of my savings. That is nothing to write home about. I am no Azim Premji, and therefore I deal with it judiciously, as most of us would. The second is the wealth of experience. Now, for most of us, there's a fantastic tijori as a wealth of experience, which is lying like a big silo, 500-ton silo of wheat. And it unfortunately finds its place to Chandarwadi because everybody thinks his own experience is not worth sharing and nobody is interested. And it is better that more famous people share their books. I have come to the conclusion that just like a silo of wheat is indeed useless for hungry people, unless you can take it out half a kilo at a time, grind it, make an atta out of it, and make a bread or a croissant or a naan or a chapati. That is the role that I'm playing in my third role. I'm trying to take out this huge amount of experience that I have, and I want to help other people to do the same. So of the 18 books that I've written, only 5 or 6 books are solo. In 12 or 13 books, I've had a co-author. My hope is that I inject that virus into people who wouldn't otherwise write. It's a good virus, not a COVID virus. And they will become authors in their own right, because honestly, every human being's experience, all the 32 people on this call included, is worth writing for somebody in some way, and all you have to do is to discover that. So that's the context. I don't write about management, but the Rangmanch on which I write is management. If an army general wrote about leadership, it will be about battle and strategy. If I write, it will be about management and enterprise. But I'm really writing about human behavior. And that is what interests me. So the first book, which Rohit referred to a while ago, came out in 2007 when Ratan Tata wrote the foreword for it. It was called The Case of the Bonsai Manager. And that was all about human intuition versus rationality. Entrepreneurs are very intuitive. And professional managers are supposed to be rational. This is the sort of folklore. And I wrote about that by taking examples from the animal world, the plant kingdom, and writing about human intuition. And various books have come in between. I want to switch now for the limited time to the latest book. It's titled Inside the Boardroom, but the subtitle says, Why and How Behavior Trumps Rationality. Our image of a boardroom is of people who are knowledgeable, who are well-dressed in black suits, who enter a very august place called a boardroom, have very ponderous discussions, come to very rational decisions, which they then announce, and they are law-abiding good citizens who have probably studied in IIT or IIM or chartered accountants or lawyers. All of that is true, but it's not the whole truth. I love quoting Niels Bohr, who said the opposite of a truth may be another truth, but there is another truth. You know, we all see the moon and we all sing Chanda Mama songs also, but we forget sometimes that we see the same face of the moon. That's nature, that's to do with the orientation of the moon's face to the earth. And it's always a curiosity for science to know what's on the other side of the moon, hence Chandrayaan 3. I'm looking at the other side of governance, which is human behavior. Because the side of governance that we can see is rules, regulations, SEBI, Companies Act, chartered accountants, and those are all very valuable. I'm not dismissing them. But parde ke piche kya hai is what has made me curious. And this book that we have written is about human behavior, because human beings are God's greatest creations of irrationality, who have psyched themselves to believe they're highly rational. In any part of the animal kingdom, animals believe they are instinctive and they behave instinctively. Human beings behave instinctively but pretend they are rational. And that's the characteristic of people like you and me. And so while I've used the boardroom as a rangmanch, it applies to clubs, gymkhanas, building cooperative societies. A building cooperative society is a unique construction where uncooperative people are assembled into one thing called a cooperative society. I'm the chairman of my cooperative society, and essentially they are highly uncooperative people. Each one thinks the other one is uncooperative, of course. But they're all coming under one umbrella, which has got the very fancy name of cooperative society. And I must link this, clubs and gymkhanas. I'm sure Delhi gymkhanas in the news in the Financial Times in London for being taken over.
अरे बाबा आप भी से मत पे बोले बैठवा
Everybody
please put your no everybody
I
please put
request
yourself
everybody-
on mute.
Okay, I thought I'd said something wrong. I thought there's a former Delhi Gymkhana president in the audience who was objecting. But Delhi Gymkhana is in the news for the same reason that Bombay Gymkhana, Pune Gymkhana, and everybody could also be in the news tomorrow. Now, why do they tend to go around in circles? I have a little experiment which I've done at home, where every year in the monsoon, the flies come into the house. And a hot selling item is the fly swatter, the plastic one with which you exercise your muscles in the morning, trying to keep the flies out. One day I was advised, and I would say in Pune also, you probably have to some extent this problem. Try this experiment. Take a transparent plastic bag or pouch, fill it up with water so it looks like a balloon now. Tie up its neck and just hang it in the middle of the window. And the flies stop coming. If you put 3 or 4 of such bags, the flies you'll be completely insulated from flies. And when I was told this, I was very curious to know why that would be so. By the way, all this has got something to do with my book. So I didn't want to just bore you to tears about the book alone. So I'm giving you a little backstory. And here's what I found. That unlike human beings who have 2 eyes, And our eyes are referred to in biology as simple eyes. I can move it in every direction, up and down, sideways. And if I want to look at what's beyond my 120 degrees vision, I have to turn my head. That's true for all of us. But a fly has a very different eye construction. If you Google eye of the fly, you'll see pictures. It's a very enormous looking eye. It is going all the way from the nose, like a big balloon, to the back of the head. And each side has 2,000 eyes. So a fly has 4,000 eyes. However, each eye is fixed. No eye can be moved. It's like a shisha. And so when a fly sees a pot of honey, it's only that eye that can see it, but none of the other eyes can see it. The eye sees something at the back. If you are standing at the back, the eye can see you, but only that eye can see you. And so if a fly wants to approach a pot of honey, it has to adapt its whole body to be able to get to that. And so it goes round in circles, like an aeroplane goes around in Bombay airport, waiting for the ATC to give its clearance to land. And then it lands. And that's why flies, but flies are very fast for a reason which I won't go into now. And democracies, companies, clubs, cooperative societies have eyes like a fly. If there are 12 members in a cooperative society, they will probably have 18 opinions. Even the husband and the wife may not have the same opinion. If it's a democracy with 1.4 billion people, you can be sure there'll be at least 1.8 billion views. Because some people have multiple views or they are iffy. And when you have multiple views, then you have to adapt yourself. You can't wish it away. That's to do with biology. And boards are no different. And the whole book is therefore exploring what happens in a board. So there are physiological issues, like each one comes with a different perspective. A chartered accountant may come in thinking that when there's an accountancy matter, he or she will comment. A CEO may come in saying, none of these guys knows anything about my company. I will take charge of the meeting. The chairman of the board may think that I'm a non-executive, but I'm still in charge of the board, so I will assert myself. And so on and so forth. An independent director will wonder what independence means because he has read some case study in the newspaper yesterday or day before. So each one comes with his or her own perspective. And trying to coalesce them through adaptability rather than efficient decision making becomes a challenge of the board. And I want to make a particular point of this. There's a big difference between efficiency and effectiveness. If both are the same, it's wonderful, but they're not usually the same. The fly approaches the pot of honey effectively, effective for its body construction. But it's not efficient because the definition of efficiency in a book of physics is the shortest distance between 2 points, and it doesn't come in the shortest distance. In the same way, governments don't work efficiently. They try to work effectively. They have to take account of this community, that segment, this segment. So they go around in circles, and companies do exactly the same thing. And therefore, my co-author, incidentally, is not on this call, but she's an academic. She's a professor of economics at SP Jain Institute. And she came from a different perspective of an academic, an economist, who are particularly interested, by the way, in behavioral economics. And we put our heads together and came to this book, in which we are exploring the unseen side of governance, whether it's a club or even a Rotary for that matter, or a company board. And we are looking at the behavioral aspect. Now, whenever I looked at corporate governance training, there's a lot of corporate governance training going on. How to become a director. There are books written by lawyers and accountants. They will explain to you all the sections of the Companies Act or the Department of Company Affairs. I have been trying to persuade them for some time that by all means teach them the technical tools of the trade. Those are important to be a successful director. But also teach them the behavioral side. But it's very difficult to teach behavior. As a parent, all of us knows it's easy to send our children to the finest schools, to the finest universities, write a check for the fees. But to teach our children behavior and values is a different ballgame. And now that my children are grown up and my grandchildren are grown up, I can think back and say, people may give credit to one parent or another, but there are upar wala ka haath bhi raha hai. Behavior is something which is very difficult to teach. So I want to give you an example about this mysterious stuff called behavior by giving you 5 or 7. I've got a list of 11, but I won't go through all the 11. How Rotary can be more effective, how boards can be more effective, how cooperative societies can be more effective. Skill number 1. How can you disagree without becoming disagreeable? Think about it. Because there will be disagreeability opportunities because two people have fundamentally different opinions. But how can you disagree without being disagreeable? Second, how to disagree strongly versus mildly, and when to disagree strongly and when to disagree mildly. You can't thump the table for every little thing, or if you do, then you don't become a constructive member of that association or board. How to listen twice as much as speaking. Some people seem to think that the market share is for them to grab, and they will talk incessantly. But a good board member, a good cooperative society member, a good Rotarian will leverage the fact that God has given twice the surface area of hearing compared to speaking. The surface area of your mouth is only 1/4 that of your 2 ears. And you don't have to be a specialist in artificial intelligence to figure this out. But the usage is exactly the opposite. We speak 3 times more or 4 times more than we listen. If you have widely different views, and there will be widely divergent views, how do you get a measure of convergence? These are the challenges, the skills that a board member requires behaviorally. It happens in a family business. It happens anywhere you can mention. These are common issues. How do you identify a mistake early and start to rectify them? Because we are so reluctant to even admit there's a mistake. How the question of rectifying it doesn't arise. So I made an acquisition as the managing director of my company. And at the end of 6-8 months, now that I've seen that company, it looks like a bad acquisition. Do I cut my losses, admit my error, or do I just carry on forever and ever? And there are pluses and minuses. I'm not recommending one approach or another. And the last example I'm giving of the kind of behavioral training that people need is your inner voice tells you something, but rationality tells you the opposite. Your various departments are coming and showing you market research, consumer reaction, product testing, and how this product is going to be wildly successful. Nano is an example of Tata's. It had all the right market research results, technical research, but when you put it into the market, it didn't work. And it took us some time, and I was in a lateral way associated with that process. It took us some time to figure out that this ain't working, and we withdrew it and cut our losses. So I've given you those as examples of the behavioral aspects of required training. And since nobody understood what I'm saying, one of my motivations was to write a book which illustrates through examples, real examples. And then people will say, I now see you. And one of my great joys is after hammering away at the Institute of Directors, at the Institute of Company Secretaries, pleading the need for behavioral training. Now that my book has come out, I've been invited twice already by some of them to come and tell them, and can I conduct a training session? Now, I'm no great training expert. I'm a practical guy with hands-on experience, but there are other people with good training experience who can build a course. And that's where my academic-orientated co-author comes into the picture, because you can train people to alter their behavior and think about things behaviorally rather than only rationally. Please remember, in this country, and frankly in any country in the world, it's possible to commit the most heinous crime and yet be within the law. I mean, it's a special genius. The Nithari murder case has just come out last week or week before. Now, whether whoever may be guilty or not guilty, and there are many such cases. I'm just taking Nithari because judgment came out only last week, but there are many cases. So it is impossible not to ignore the behavioral factors. And when somebody says there were 2G scam, and you spend 15 years or 10 years proving that there is no 2G scam. Somebody says there was this riot in this particular city or that particular state, and you spend 15 years saying it is not instigated by anybody. Then you start to wonder whether the behavioral science can be interpreted. In line with this, our book has a good blend of academic insights and practical examples. For example, the academic insights are that please understand that when you're a director in a company or a member of a cooperative society or a member of a club or a family managed business, you enter a room where people have behavioral biases. And the academic classification of the 4 or 5 types of behavioral biases are listed in the book. And don't wish it away. Don't say that person is biased as though you're not. You're also biased. We're all biased. But once you become conscious of something, it's human nature that you can do something. If somebody says, Aapka zaban tikha hai, well, you can try to do something about it. You may not agree with it. During my working career, my wife has had occasion to tell me, in those days, the telephone would be in one place and you had to go to the telephone. There was no mobile. And I might have talked tough with some colleague who didn't complete his target or whatever. She'd say, my wife would say, I don't know who you were talking to. I couldn't understand the subject, but you could have been less harsh. Of course, that will result immediately in a little altercation. But later on, I would think about it and say, it's my wife. I mean, she has no other interests than that I should behave nicely with people. And so I would try to self-correct. So becoming aware is very important, and becoming aware of biases are listed in the form of a table. Anybody who sees it will say, "Isme kaun si badi baat hai?" But try going to the next meeting and find out the biases you enter the room with. The second thing that we have is, I believe that you always get signals of something going wrong. The challenge is not that there are no signals. The challenge is how do you interpret those signals? So, for example, if you're raising a family, which all of us either already are doing or have done in the past, your daughter or son is 12 or 14, is behaving in an odd way. Suddenly the marks have come down. They come late at night, don't communicate much. These are behavioral changes. As a parent, you would not ignore it, would you? Would you say there is no proof, so I shall just sit back and wait? By the time the child is 18, he or she may have gone astray. No. As a parent, you'll do something about it. Try to find out by talking to them, by talking to friends, by talking to the school principal, so that if there is a correction to be done, you do that. If the sky is dark and there's a cold, gusty wind, would you leave your house without an umbrella on the basis that there is no proof that it's raining? You would not. In the same way, when you're sitting in a board meeting, you will have to read the signals. You will actually don't need any training for that. You will automatically feel the signals. But what do you do with those signals? We have given a questionnaire on page 20, 21 somewhere, where there are 15 questions. You apply it to any committee meeting, Rotary Club, board meeting. I keep saying board meeting, but you can substitute that word with any other human group. And if you score 10 over 10, if you score over 10, then you know that this company or this institution is in trouble. It's time to intervene. And if you score 5 to 10, you'll say, well, there'll always be a few problems. Let's try to help in solving them. If it's less than 5, you'll say, well, human nature is not perfect. We are all got our deficiencies. This ye bardasht kar sakte. So it's got what I call a prodromal test. A prodrome is an expression used in medical doctors. Before the actual disease sets in, what are the signs that you get? Badan dukta hai, sar dukta hai, zukam aata hai. A doctor takes those signals and starts treating you. He doesn't wait till you're in the ICU. So in the same way, a board director must have the skill of a doctor to read and interpret prodromal signals. The last thing I would like to mention, and then perhaps we can open it up for a little interaction, which will be more valuable for me also, apart from yourselves, is what do you do if you send funny signals? Suppose you're sitting in a company where you get 13 out of 15. That's a red rag. It's a red light. So we have given on page 45 or 50 a 7D process. 7D is just to make it easy to understand. There's nothing so clever about it. And the 7D stand for get engaged on the subject, to finally depart and disclose from that board. If I take an example, what happened in Yes Bank? Long before the scam hit the public domain, the chairman of the bank resigned, and in his resignation letter, he disclosed the accounts are not right. Everything is wrong here. I can't sit in this board and run this bank, see this bank being run. Unfortunately, nobody did anything about it. The rest of the board members carried on. And it took, I think, another 18 months or 2 years before things got completely out of control and various things. Take Kingfisher Airlines. I mean, all of us have read this in the newspaper, but we have covered Kingfisher Airlines. Everybody knew that this fellow was out of control. He didn't pay the air hostesses, but he was celebrating his 60th birthday in Goa with helicopters going around the site. Yeah, and he claims he's innocent. The people who are independent directors at that time could have read the signals and could have done something about it, which may or may not have been successful. But I give credit to the guy who did something about it rather than the guy who ignored it, which is the bane of our public life. We ignore it as though nothing has happened because we are looking for incontrovertible proof. Life doesn't work on incontrovertible proof. It works on your sense and intuition and judgment. And directors are hired for judgment, not for skills. Skills are important. I'm not saying you take a totally unskilled person. I'm not saying you take an astrologer onto your board because he's got an intuition based on some other science. But I am saying that respect human judgment. It adduces to my first book, The Case of the Bonsai Manager. It adduces to my latest book, number 18. And it's not the last book I'm going to write. I shall inflict a few more books in due course because it's about human behavior and intuition that the affairs of men and the pages of history are written, right? So we have given the 7 Ds that apply. And there's a last idea in the epilogue, which we made a passing reference to, which I should mention because these are 2 or 3 somewhat distinctive. I hesitate to say unique because that sounds like bragging. I have had experience where people have invited to me a fly on the wall member of the board, which means I'm not independent, I'm not dependent, I'm not chairman, I'm not CEO. I'm just allowed to participate in a few board meetings after signing non-disclosure agreements and so on, just to observe the behavioral part and not to apply my mind to the rational part, whether the acquisition should happen, whether profit should be reported in this way or that way. Those are not the subjects. And I must say that firstly, I enjoyed it because out of sheer experience and judgment, at the end of this 2 or 3 such sessions, I was able to offer a point of view. And at least in the 2 cases where I took part, there is some fragmentary evidence that it had a positive effect. And so I am advocating that there is a role, not for a guy who's got a PhD in behavioral sciences, because those guys may be good, but they are not necessarily marks of judgment. Marks of judgment come out of sheer experience. And we have recommended that companies who are really interested in governance, even Rotary clubs, I would say, should have a fly on the wall concept. Maybe a past president of Rotary or a president of some other Rotary to just sit and not participate in the discussions after signing non-disclosure agreements or whatever is required. So maybe I should stop there. If I've written 18 books, you can see my propensity to carry on is rather high, but you all have a busy day's work ahead. And so I hope I've provided some fuel for you to light and debate. Can I stop there, Rohit, Umeshji, and if there are any interactions or questions, I'll be very happy.
Definitely. And I'm sure that many questions will come up. Any questions from
Umesh, I have a question, if I may, Ganesh here. Gopal, I just want to push on one point you mentioned. I mean, you mentioned Kingfisher and, of course, the famous Yes Bank story. But tell me one thing. I mean, one thing I've realized in the last 6 years of being on boards is it's much better to be on a large board which is, which has an independent chairman and CEO like State Bank or Honeywell, etc., than to be in a very owner dominated business? Because whatever be the intention of the independent director, do you really think there is an opportunity to make your point and actually get it done by the very, very vociferous owner?
I can't say you're wrong, but I'm not able to say you're right either. Because, that's a sweeping generalization. I have found owner-driven companies which have been very open. But yes, there are many who are not. Conversely, I have found large public companies where somebody dominates and doesn't let. So I've seen both. I think the test you should apply is not its size or its nature, but the behavior in the boardroom. And there is one very large, I won't mention names for obvious reasons, public listed company, very prominent, where as soon as the subject is open and the second slide is put up by the CFO or the marketing chief, the chairman jumps into the fray. And apparently one independent director told him, "Sir, you should let other people also speak." He says, "You are being denied the value of my experience for 35 years on this company's board." Now, if you come with that attitude, then there is a problem. There are many owners who feel that independent directors know nothing about my company. What is there to ask them? There are many private sector chiefs also who have that view. Indeed, I would say even public sector chiefs in banks, where some joint secretary thinks he knows more about the bank than the people sitting on the board. So these are all the human behavioral frailties that you need to overcome. And I would hesitate to sort of sweep all of them, though I broadly agree with your direction.
Just one quick supplementary, Gopal. You mentioned bias, which is a very interesting topic. And I mean, we were discussing AI before the formal session started. And even the worry about artificial intelligence is that it will reinforce the biases by kind of playing to your biases. So have you, in your book or through your research, found really methods of people who have been 30 years and have a story of their childhood for almost every incident that comes up? Is it possible to overcome their biases?
I think it's possible through what we have called the Clementine mirror. And since that may be a mysterious title, Winston Churchill was highly opinionated, highly piggish, highly irascible, though he was a great leader for those 3 years. Rest of his leadership record is debatable by historians. And during the war, when they were in the underground, because of his views against prohibition, he was imbibing a lot and he was very tough with his people. And one day, a senior British Navy guy came to Clementine, which is his wife, Winston's wife, and said, "Madam, I should not come and tell you about your own husband. But, the nation is in need of his leadership, but we cannot tolerate the way he leads. And here are his behavioral aberrations. Can you do something about it?" Clementine thought about it, and I call this a Clementine mirror for this reason. And she wrote him a letter, which is a beautiful letter. I've reproduced it in the book, in this book or some other book, because I saw it in the Imperial War Museum at London. Next to, say, Regent's Park, there is an Imperial War Museum. And then she tore it up and put it into the waste paper basket, saying, "I can't destroy this man. When he reads this letter, something will happen to him." Unfortunately, the maid in the morning picked it up and thought it's a very valuable, and she gave it to the authorities, who have sellotaped it and put it up in the museum. And that's where I got a copy of it from. And it's a beautifully worded letter from a loving wife to a husband she admires, but whose faults she cannot ignore. And so I believe she held a mirror, a psychological mirror to his face. And just like an optical mirror, a concave mirror can reveal all the flaws on your otherwise handsome or beautiful face, a psychological mirror can do the same for you. And whether it's a wife or a sibling or a dear friend or somebody who could speak truth to power, having a Clementine mirror is a great help. Now, you as an independent director can't provide that Clementine mirror, but the fly on the wall can. So there are 2 or 3 such thoughts, but nothing is foolproof. If you're like, doomed to arrogance on your own, like Coriolanus in the Roman Empire, or Julius Caesar, or many modern ones which are not worthy of mention, I think you'll fly to your doom.
Thanks.
Gopal, I have a contrary question that you yourself have said that behavior is difficult to be influenced and changed of others. So, should we ignore the behavior of the others and should calibrate ourselves to the environment and the behavior of the others while working in the group so that it becomes more effective rather than focusing on changing the behavior of others?
You're absolutely right, Umesh. I mean, it's not a contrary question, it's the right question. You know, when Swami Vivekananda went to Chicago in 1893 or thereabouts, people asked him this question because he kept telling people, he even told John D. Rockefeller that the money that you have earned as the richest man in the world may not belong to you. Maybe you're a conduit, a pipe through which it should go back to society. When people asked him, how can you tell us things like, don't worry about the result, do your duty and stuff like that? He said, Vedanta, in a modern form, he modernized it. I think it's still wonderful that he did so. I'm able to repeat it without getting lost in the philosophy. Says you must do 4 things. Become self-aware. It's easy to be aware of other people's faults, by the way. I can sit down and write lots of articles criticizing Rajnath Singh or Narendra Modi or Amit Shah or Devendra Fadnavis. There is no problem. Ask me to write myself. And then I'll be very niggardly in that criticism. So be self-aware. The second suggestion from Vedanta is serve others before serving yourself. The third one he said is take decisions ruthlessly, but implement them with compassion. So if I look at this cluster, Vedanta has been there for a long time. Most of us don't go to Vedanta classes. And when we go to Vedanta classes, we don't have exponents who will tell us with such simplicity. Becoming self-aware is the biggest thing. And so I entirely agree with you, sir.
Thank you. Any other question?
I have one question.
Yeah, Mridula, carry on.
Gopalji, very insightful and very unique perspective. While you were talking, I ordered your book also because I'm very intrigued to read all the 7 Ds and the Clementine Mirror and all of that. Since you're talking about behaviors, I was thinking about the minority communities on the boards and do their behaviors differ? And I'm particularly interested in the gender, women. So women on boards, and what are the behaviors of women who are successful on boards? And the reason I'm differentiating is because I feel like in a non-dominant group on boards, the pressures are slightly different. So what is your perspective on that? And what does it take for a woman to be successful on a board?
I think you raise a very valid question, and I wish I gave you a nice, simple answer. There isn't one. That's the disclaimer that I must place first. That I've become aware that if you're a minority, you're the only Muslim on the board, you're the only woman on the board, it is a pressure. And I want to tell you how I learned this. You know, for my first 47 years, I lived in India, I worked in India, amongst Indians, and I could never understand this whole point about minorities and this and that. Then I went as chairman of Unilever in Arabia. I was living in Jeddah with my family. And I had an experience which I'm narrating to say there are no easy answers to this. Babri Masjid happened, 6th of December, 1992. And in a mosque, a fatwa was made asking for me to be expelled from the kingdom on the ground that I was earning fair-sized money, which is the reason I went to Jeddah in the first place. And I was sending this money to India to some parties who were breaking the mosque down. I was totally unaware of this till I got a ghost call, which threatened my daughters, who were at that time 10, 12 years old, and put the fear of God into me. It should not have, logically, but behaviorally it did. For the next 6 months, my car was followed and my house was watched. And the governor of Makkah told me that a complaint has come. I have to look into the complaint, but you don't worry, you carry on with your normal work. At the end of the 6th month, it was withdrawn. That influenced my behavior a lot. So to pretend that it doesn't influence a person's behavior is a bit silly. All that you can do is to say, now, how do I adjust to it? And what I did was to say, I am a minority in a majority Muslim country. They have a grievance that every Hindu or every non-Muslim in this country is earning big money and sending it back to break mosque, which is ridiculous and irrational. I've got better uses of my money. But I put myself and my family on a great alert to just sort of fall in line with all the rules. But I'll be myself. I will not change who I am. And I think if I have to offer a point of view to any minority, whether it's woman or I think I'll keep to woman because that's the aspect you highlighted, I would do the same. If a woman can, I know I'm putting it in a bold way, but I'm doing it in the interest of time and brevity. If she can forget that she's a woman and just behave who she is. You see, women face two pressures, at least that come to my mind immediately. One is they become reclusive and withdrawn because they're a minority. Or second, they become over-aggressive because every point becomes too many.
The balance is missing. Yeah.
The balance may be missing.
Maybe.
And I think if they just be who they are, if Mridula can just be Mridula, I think it will work well. And if that Mridula version is not good enough for that board, from her point of view or the board's point of view, then you go in a particular direction. But when Mridula or whoever, I'm just taking your name because you happen to be Mridula, tries to prove I'm not Mridula, that you think, then you start getting into distorted answers.
Mr. Gopalakrishnan, I think it was a very interesting talk this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was wondering, you had talked about the 4 points of the Vedantas that Swami Vivekananda spoke about, but you didn't tell us about the 4th one. So what was the 4th one?
Let me try to remember. My aging brain cells let me down sometimes. I said, be self-aware. I think I said, take decisions ruthlessly, but implement them with compassion. I think I said, serve others before yourself. The 4th one is protect your resources that enable you to do business. And resources not only means employees, vendors, but also, as it was said in the Vedanta, the air, the water, the Panchabhuta. The Vedanta says, look after the Panchabhuta, which is the earliest form of ESG. 4,000 years ago, somebody even thought of it. It's quite amazing. Protect your resources. And if I look back at my last 50 years in my career, if I had been wise enough to have followed these 4 principles, I would have been far more successful person than I have been. So I love to share it because it's something which is easy to know but difficult to practice. The beauty of Vedanta is easy to know because Vid means knowledge. Easy to know, but to put it to practice is very tough. I hope I've answered your question, Vikram.
Yes, sir.
Are you the same Puri with mustard oil fame or a different family? There's a Puri family, Puri oil mills.
Neither taste or smell like.
Sorry?
I'm not the same person.
You're not the same.
I said I'm afraid I neither taste nor smell like.
Right. Any others?
But thank you. You answered it. If
Umesh,
nobody
can I
else
ask?
has one, can I go again?
Yes, Umesh,
Please.
Yes, should I?
Right.
Yeah.
Reshma.
Yes. Wonderful talk, Gopalji. I just have one question. Like you mentioned about one crisis already, but especially when it comes with dealing with government or dealing with government licensing, how actually board takes a decision? Like as you mentioned, there is a human factor to it and there is a policy factor to it, and if both of these are contradictory, especially when it comes for government licensing, how the decisions have been taken rightfully to make sure that our work is done?
That's a brilliant question, Reshma. The challenge of board directorship and leadership is to take two opposite points of view, reconcile them, and still function. Many people think I'm ready. I've been chief general manager of a bank and I'm ready now to be a non-executive director. That may be true, but it also may not be true. So I'll give you two examples of what question you raised. Practical examples make it easy. Tatas were putting up a port in a place called Dhamra on the Odisha coast. And all the studies had been done and it was in fairly advanced stage of construction when Greenpeace people types, environmental people came and said that this is the nesting site of the olive ridley turtles. And if you put up a port here, it will change various things. And that's not good for the world. There was a conflict between environment and but we have got all the government permissions, by the way. The environmental impact assessment, the Ministry of Environment. So we could have taken the view, you go to hell, I've got all the government permissions, which is what business people tend to do. But what Tatas did at that time, and I was not directly involved, but indirectly, because I'm sitting on the board of Tata Sons, I get to know and listen to these things. We said, listen, if it's going to harm the olive ridley turtle, we will abandon the port. But we must also have some evidence of it. And so you nominate any 2 or 3 international experts. We have been to our experts, but you don't seem to believe them. And if they say so, we will follow. And what they came up with, the activists said, you have to do some things on faith. It can't be proved. We said, listen, after we spent $500 million, you coming and telling us faith, all these days you kept quiet. I'm sorry, we are going ahead. We did it. We went ahead because we had all the permissions. And by the way, it's now 8 years that port is operating and the olive ridley turtles have increased their nestings, not been damaged. Now, that may not be because of the port, but all I'm saying is it has not harmed it. Flip side, I was a vice chairman of a company called Tata Chemicals, and we were very keen to get a certain type of naturally mined soda ash in Tanzania. So for various economic reasons, which I won't go into, we got invited by the government of Tanzania. We spent about $10-15 million doing all the initial studies, at which stage we got a message that this is the nesting site of the little flamingo. The little flamingo, I had never heard of a little flamingo. And we found out is a bird that flies from, I think, Terra del Fuego to Siberia, and it nests in this particular lake. We did our little research and found that indeed it is a nesting site. And if the little flamingo is disturbed, it disturbs the aerial path of the birds in flight and it will disturb their. We abandoned the project and we told our shareholders we're writing off 10 or 15 million dollars. I've forgotten the exact amount. This quarter, our results are very bad, but I think it's for the long-term good. And our shareholders welcomed it. So I'm giving you two opposite decisions, both taken ruthlessly, but with compassion.
So we stop here and I would straightforward go to Vardhaman Jainji to narrate his 4 lines and give the vote of thanks to Gopal.
Thank you, President. Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Audible, very much audible.
Okay. Thank you, Gopalakrishnan ji. It was absolutely a singular privilege to have you with us at this Zoom meeting and share your rare insights and virtually take us through the book, right from the 11 pillars to the 7 Ds. It's, I think, a handbook for anybody who's wanting to be in the boardroom. So much for it. As is the custom in Rotary, I speak in Hindi, the concluding portion. And before I could go to the 4 lines that are almost a mandate for me at the end of each meeting, 2 things that stood out for me. was one, the self-awareness, and I resort to Kabir to supplement what you said. It says, "Bura jo khojan main chala, bura na miliya koe, jo dil khoja apna, to mujhse bura na koe." That kind of awareness one required. And where Kabir says human frailties are what they have been always and shall continue to be always, and we live, whether in the boardroom or in the Rotary meetings, with people where these human frailties will always be to the fore. When Kabir says, "Maya mari na man mara, marmar gaye sharir. Maya mari na man mara, marmar gaye sharir. Asha trishna na mari, kah gaye das Kabir." So
Wow.
if one were to be in sync with the Bura Jo Khojan Main Chala and knows human frailties, then possibly his approach in the boardroom, wherever, in the corporate boardroom or elsewhere, would be approach which is balanced. So, गोपाल कृष्ण जी, थैंक यू सो मच. मानव व्यवहार से व्यवहार का अर्थशास्त्र, इस पर आपने आज जो हमें एक झलक दी आपकी किताब के जरिए, उसके लिए मैं खूब खूब धन्यवाद आपको देता हूं. और मेरी 4 पंक्तियों पे आता हूं. मुझे आशा ही नहीं, विश्वास है गोपाल जी आपको ये भाएगी. By the way, I've been accused by my Rotary colleagues of using vocab which they do not understand at many occasions. So for the benefit, I first give out the meaning of 3 or 4 words that I'll be using. Noor is light. Noor is light. Nehar is health. Giridhar is Giridhar, pahad uthane wala. And Tevar is attitude. Now, with these in the background, let me come down to the lines for you, Gopalji. Tata, Brook Bond, kaho ya lever. Tata, Brook Bond, kaho ya lever. सब देख चुके इनके तेवर. टाटा, ब्रुक बॉन्ड कहो या लीवर, सब देख चुके इनके तेवर. गोपाल कहो या कृष्ण, गोपाल कहो या कृष्ण, जहां जहां जुड़े वहां ये बने जेवर. जेवर इज ज्वेल. व्यापार जगत हो या अध्यापन, व्यापार जगत हो या अध्यापन, नूर बने गोपाल या बने नेहर. अपयश नहीं कॉर्पोरेट्स का मुकद्दर, अपयश नहीं कॉर्पोरेट्स का मुकद्दर, नाकामी बोर्ड रूम की है, बताए गोपाल गिरिधर. Gopal ji, thank you so much. With these lines, I once again thank you so much for being with us this morning. Thank you.
So friends, we are coming to the end of this session. This was a wonderful session. Once again, thank you, Gopal, for sparing your time and coming this early morning and talking to us on a thought-provoking topic. And I adjourn the meeting with the permission of Gopal ji.
Thank you and all the best to you. Season's greetings. Bye.